The year was 2347, and humanity had finally earned its place among the stars. After centuries of dreaming about what lay beyond their small blue world chancellor, Elena Vasquez stood at the observation window of Axiom Prime, the greatest space station ever built by any species in the known galaxy. And she watched the ships of 43 different alien civilizations drift past like fireflies against the endless black canvas of space. She was 62 years old with silver hair that she kept short and practical, and her dark eyes held the kind of wisdom that came only from decades of fighting battles with words instead of weapons. 20 years she had spent building bridges between Earth and the alien powers who looked down upon humanity like adults, watching children play with dangerous toys. The galactic concord was a fragile thing, held together by treaties and trade agreements and the shared fear of what might happen if the great powers ever went to war again. Humanity was the newest member of this cosmic alliance, having only discovered faster-than-light travel a mere century ago, while most other species had been sailing between stars for thousands upon thousands of years. The aliens called humans the young ones, and they said it with a tone that mixed curiosity with something that felt very much like contempt. But Elena had changed things slowly and carefully. One handshake at a time, one treaty at a time, one friendship at a time. Today was supposed to be her greatest triumph, as representatives from every member species had gathered on Axiom Prime for the Unity Summit, where humanity would finally be granted full voting rights in the Concord. Council Elena turned away from the window and smiled at her aide, a young man named David Chen, who had served her faithfully for 5 years. "Are you nervous, Chancellor?" David asked as he handed her a tablet containing her speech. "I stopped being nervous about speeches 20 years ago," Elena replied with a warm laugh that made the wrinkles around her eyes deepen in a pleasant way. "What I feel now is hope, David. Pure and simple hope that my grandchildren will grow up in a galaxy where Earth is respected and protected." What neither of them knew was that in a dark corner of the station, hidden behind layers of holographic disguises and false identity codes, an assassin was watching and waiting. His name was Kethver, and he belonged to the Velcari Dominion, the oldest and most powerful empire in the galaxy, rulers of over 200 star systems and commanders of a fleet that numbered 12,000 warships. The Velcari were tall creatures with skin like polished obsidian and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands, capable of tearing through metal. They had ruled their corner of the cosmos for 1,000 years through fear and military might, and they did not appreciate the way humanity was rising so quickly through the ranks of galactic society. High Archon Zethral, supreme leader of the Velcari, had given Kethver his orders personally in the throne room of their home world. "These humans breed too fast and learn too quickly," the Archon had said with disgust dripping from every word. "They adapt to everything we throw at them, and they refuse to know their place in the natural order of things. What would you have me do, my Archon?" Kethver had asked while kneeling before the throne. "Kill their leader and make sure the galaxy sees it happen," Zethro commanded with a cruel smile that showed rows of sharp teeth. "Without her, the humans will fall into chaos and fighting among themselves as primitive species always do when they lose their shepherd." And so Kethver had traveled to Axiom Prime with murder in his heart and a plasma blade hidden in his false arm. The Unity Summit began with great ceremony as delegates from dozens of worlds filled the Grand Assembly Hall, a massive chamber with walls made of transparent crystal that allowed everyone to see the stars. Outside, Chancellor Vasquez walked to the central podium while cameras broadcast her image to every corner of the galaxy, including 12 billion humans on Earth and the colonies who watched with pride and excitement. Elena began her speech with words about unity and cooperation. about the future that all species could build together if they chose peace over war and understanding over fear. She spoke of her dreams for humanity, of the day when Terran children would play alongside Valkyrie children and Xanthari children and children of species that had not yet been discovered. The delegates listened with various expressions ranging from genuine interest to polite boredom to barely hidden hostility. Lena was halfway through her speech when Kethver made his move. He dropped his holographic disguise and charged toward the podium with his plasma blade igniting in a flash of blue-white energy that cast harsh shadows across the assembly hall. Security officers from 6 different species tried to stop him, but Kethver was faster than any human could be, and his forearms let him fight multiple opponents at once. While still moving forward, Elena saw him coming, and she did not run or scream or beg for mercy. She simply stood tall and faced her death with the same dignity she had shown in every challenge of her remarkable life. The plasma blade found her heart, and Elena Vasquez, Chancellor of Earth and the greatest diplomat humanity had ever produced, fell dead on the stage of the Unity Summit. The cameras kept broadcasting as Kethver raised his bloody blade and shouted words in the Valkyrie language that translated roughly to us. Know your place, humans. The stars belong to the strong. Security forces finally overwhelmed him and dragged him away. But the damage was done. 12 billion humans had just watched their beloved leader murdered in cold blood by an alien assassin. And the silence that followed was heavier than the void of space itself on Earth. People stopped in the streets and stared at screens with tears streaming down their faces. In the colonies on Mars and Europa and Titan, workers dropped their tools and stood frozen in shock and grief on 100 human starships scattered across the galaxy. Crews gathered around view screens and watched the replay of their Chancellor's final moments again and again. The Valkyrie expected this moment to break humanity, to shatter them into warring factions that would tear each other apart, while the Dominion watched and laughed high. Archon Zethral received the news of the successful assassination, and he smiled his cruel smile once more, certain that he had just removed the human threat from the Galactic stage forever. But he did not understand humans at all. He did not know that humanity's greatest strength was not their intelligence or their adaptability or their stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Their greatest strength was what happened when you gave them a reason to stand together. And now, for the first time in human history, every single person on Earth and in the colonies had exactly the same thought burning in their minds. Someone had killed their leader. Someone was going to pay. The stars themselves seemed to grow colder as humanity began to stir, and the Valkyrie had no idea what they had just awakened. For 3 days after Chancellor Vasquez fell, humanity went completely silent. No diplomatic transmissions left Earth or any human colony. No trade negotiations continued. No human ships responded to hails from alien vessels. The Galactic Concord grew nervous as ambassadors from worried species tried again and again to establish contact with Earth. But every channel remained dead and empty. The Valkyrie, however, celebrated in their dark throne rooms and military halls. High Archon Zethral held a great feast where he mocked the primitive humans and their dead leader, while his generals laughed and raised glasses filled with wine made from fruits that grew on conquered worlds. They are broken, Zethral declared to his admirals with satisfaction thick in his voice. Within a week, they will be fighting among themselves over who leads next. And within a month, their precious unity will crumble into dust. His advisors agreed, because this was how every other young species had reacted when the Valkyrie killed their leaders. The pattern was always the same, and its Valkyrie had used it dozens of times throughout their long History of conquest, but on the fourth day, something unexpected happened. A single transmission burst out from Earth on every frequency at once, reaching every corner of the galaxy in an instant. It was not a plea for peace, or a cry for help, or a declaration of surrender. It was a simple announcement that made the blood of every Valkyrie who heard it turn cold. The nations of Earth no longer exist as separate entities. The transmission stated in a calm and measured voice. As of this moment, all human territories have merged into a single governing body known as the United Terran Coalition. And we speak now with one voice. The vote had taken 11 minutes for every government on Earth, and every colonial administration across the solar system and beyond to agree unanimously that the old ways were finished. There would be no more borders between human nations. There would be no more competing interests or political rivalries or ancient grudges. There was only humanity now, united as one people for the first time in their entire history. And they had a single purpose burning in their collective heart. The transmission continued with words that would be remembered for 1,000 years. Admiral Marcus Kane has been appointed Supreme Commander of all Terran military forces, and he carries the full authority of every human being who lives and breathes. The Valkyrie Dominion has committed an act of war against the entire human species. We do not forget. We do not forgive. We are coming. On Axiom Prime. Alien diplomats watched the broadcast with expressions that ranged from shock to fear to something that looked almost like respect. The Xanthari ambassador, an ancient being with 6 eyes and wisdom gathered over 3 centuries of life, turned to his aide and spoke words that would prove prophetic. The Valkyrie have made the worst mistake in galactic history, he whispered while his eyes blinked in a pattern that indicated deep concern. They have given the humans something they never had before. A reason to stop fighting each other and start fighting together. On Earth, the transformation happened with a speed that terrified every alien intelligence agency watching factories that had been making consumer goods switched to military production overnight. Scientists who had been studying medicine or agriculture or entertainment technology found themselves reassigned to weapons, research, and starship engineering. Every university became a training ground for soldiers and pilots and tactical officers. Young people lined up at recruitment centers in numbers that broke every computer system designed to process them. Old people came out of retirement to teach the skills they had learned in forgotten wars. Children collected scrap metal and recycled materials to feed the hungry. Machines of production. Nobody ordered them to do this. Nobody forced them. They simply did it because Elena Vasquez had died for them, and they would honor her memory by making sure her killers faced justice. Admiral Marcus Kane was 65 years old with a face like weathered stone and eyes that had seen too many good soldiers die in battles that politicians should have prevented. He had fought in the Proxima rebellions when human colonies had briefly tried to break away from Earth, and he had spent the decades since then hoping he would never have to lead humanity into another war. But now war had found them, and Kane was exactly the kind of leader humanity needed. He established his command center in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by screens showing fleet positions and production numbers and intelligence reports from across the galaxy. His first order was simple, but terrifying in its implications. I want every shipyard running at maximum capacity. Around the clock, he commanded his staff. I want our research teams to unlock every experimental technology we have been holding back. I want a complete tactical assessment of Valkyrie military capabilities within 48 hours. His second order went out to the Galactic Concord as a public transmission. The Valkyrie have chosen extinction. Kane announced with no emotion in his voice whatsoever, "We will deliver it. And any species that stands with them will share their fate. Any species that stands aside will be remembered as neutral. Any species that stands with us will be called brother." The effect was immediate and dramatic. 17 species quietly withdrew their ambassadors from Valkyrie space within hours of receiving Kane's message. Trade routes that had connected Valkyrie worlds to the greater galactic economy began to dry up as merchants decided they did not want to be anywhere near what was coming. The Valkyrie suddenly found themselves isolated in a way they had never experienced before. And for the first time in 1,000 years, their generals began to feel something that might have been fear. High Archon Zethral dismissed these concerns with a wave of his four-clawed hands. "Let them come," he declared with arrogance that would soon prove fatal. "We have 12,000 warships and warriors who have never known defeat. And these humans have barely 500 vessels in their entire fleet. The mathematics of war favor us overwhelmingly. They will break against our defenses like waves against a cliff." What Zethral did not know, what no alien species had ever discovered, was that humanity had been holding back for a century. They had hidden their true technological capabilities, presenting themselves as the young and harmless newcomers to galactic society while secretly developing weapons and systems that no other species had ever imagined. In underground laboratories and hidden research stations scattered across human space, scientists had been working on projects that would change the nature of warfare. Forever Project Synchrony was the most ambitious of all. A quantum-based communication and navigation system that allowed human ships to coordinate their movements across vast distances with perfect precision. Admiral Kane reviewed the final test results of Project Synchrony and allowed himself a small smile. "How soon can we deploy this across the entire fleet?" he asked his chief engineer. 6 weeks, came the reply. "Maybe less if we cut some safety protocols." "Cut them all," Kane ordered without hesitation. "Safety is a luxury we can no longer afford. And the Valkyrie are about to learn what happens when you awaken a sleeping giant." Across human space, the drums of war were beating, and the galaxy held its breath as it waited to see what would happen when the youngest species in the Concord unleashed its full fury against the oldest empire among the stars. The Valkyrie had ruled their empire through fear for 1,000 years, and they believed they understood war better than any other species in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds and crushed rebellions without number, and their military doctrine was built on a simple principle that had never failed them: strike first, strike hard, and make your enemies watch helplessly as your superior numbers grind them into submission. High Archon Zethral expected the humans to attack in the traditional way, sending their small fleet against one Valkyrie system at a time in a slow and grinding campaign that would take decades and cost them everything. He positioned his 12,000 warships across his empire's borders, creating a defensive wall that he believed no force in the galaxy could break. His admirals assured him that the mathematics were clear and certain. The humans had perhaps 800 combat-ready ships at most, and even if they somehow tripled that number in the weeks since the assassination, they would still be hopelessly outnumbered. The Valkyrie settled in to wait, confident that time was on their side. They were catastrophically wrong. 6 weeks after Chancellor Vasquez's death, Admiral Kane gave the order that would change galactic history forever. All fleet elements report ready for synchronized jump. His communications officer announced in the war room beneath the Rocky Mountains. Confirmation received from all 2,400 vessels across 14 staging points. Kane looked at the massive holographic display showing the positions of his fleet and the locations of every major Valkyrie military installation across 200 light-years of space. Execute Operation Vasquez. He commanded. What happened next had never been attempted by any species in the known history of the galaxy using the quantum synchronization technology that human scientists had perfected in secret. The entire Terran fleet jumped through slipspace at exactly the same instant. 2,400 human warships emerged from faster-than-light travel at 200 different locations simultaneously, appearing around every Valkyrie shipyard, fleet base, weapons platform, and military installation at the exact same moment. The Valkyrie had no warning. Their sensors detected the slipspace signatures a fraction of a second before human weapons began firing. And by the time their commanders understood what was happening, the battle was already lost. Captain Sarah Morrison commanded the destroyer Relentless as it emerged from slipspace alongside 47 other human vessels at the Valkyrie's largest shipyard complex, all weapons-free. She shouted over the chaos of alarms and targeting data flooding her bridge. Focus fire on the construction docks and fuel depots. The space around the shipyard erupted into a storm of plasma fire and missile contrails as human ships unleashed everything they had against the unprepared. Valkyrie Defender's enemy warships tried to respond, but they had been caught at anchor with their shields down and their crews scattered across the station. Morrison watched as the Relentless and her sister ships tore through the Valkyrie formation like wolves through a flock of sheep. 3 enemy cruisers destroyed, her tactical officer reported with grim satisfaction. Shipyard infrastructure at 40% and falling. Keep firing, Morrison ordered. I want nothing left but debris. This scene repeated itself across the entire Valkyrie Empire in a coordinated assault that lasted less than 4 hours. By the time the sun set on Earth that day, the Valkyrie Dominion had lost over 4,000 warships, 90% of their shipbuilding capacity, and most of their military leadership. High Archon Zethral received the casualty reports in his throne room, and for the first time in his long life, he felt true terror clutching at his heart. How is this possible? He demanded of his surviving admirals. How did they strike everywhere at once? We do not know, my Archon, his senior military advisor admitted with shame burning in his 4 eyes. Our intelligence indicated no such technology existed in human space. Then your intelligence was worthless. Zethral screamed with rage that shook the walls of his palace. Find me answers or I will have your heads mounted on spikes. But there were no answers that could save the Valkyrie. Now Admiral Kane had instituted what he called the Vasquez Doctrine, named in honor of the fallen Chancellor, and it guided every action the human fleet took. The doctrine was simple but profound. No occupied world would be harmed, no civilian population would be targeted, and atrocity would be committed in the name of revenge, but no military asset belonging to the Valkyrie would be spared. Human ships hunted down every Valkyrie warship they could find, pursuing them across star systems and through asteroid fields and into the darkest corners of space where the enemy tried to hide. When Valkyrie vessels surrendered, they were taken prisoner and treated with dignity according to the laws of war that humanity had developed over centuries of conflict among themselves. When Valkyrie vessels fought, they were destroyed without mercy or hesitation. The galaxy watched in stunned amazement as the youngest species in the Concord systematically dismantled the oldest empire in recorded history. Ambassador Dexal of the Zentari Council addressed the Galactic Concord in an emergency session convened to discuss the human offensive. We have witnessed something unprecedented, Dexal declared, with all 6 of his eyes blinking in patterns that indicated profound astonishment. The humans have achieved in 6 weeks what no other species has accomplished in 1,000 years of trying. They have broken the Velkari military completely and utterly, and they have done so while showing restraint that none of us expected. Their ships pass over Velkari colony worlds without firing a single shot at civilian targets. There, soldiers capture enemy personnel and treat them humanely. They wage war with a fury we have never seen. Yet they hold themselves to standards that put our own civilizations to shame. On Earth, news of the victory sparked celebrations that lasted for days. But Admiral Kane refused to participate in any of them. He sat alone in his command center, studying reports and planning the next phase of the campaign, his weathered face showing no joy or satisfaction. His aide approached cautiously and asked if the Admiral wanted to address the people, to share in their celebration of humanity's triumph. Kane shook his head slowly and spoke words that revealed the weight he carried on his shoulders. "We have won battles, not the war," he said quietly. "The Archon still lives, and as long as he breathes, the Velkari will believe they can recover." Chancellor Vasquez did not die so that we could celebrate partial victories. She died believing that humanity could build something better. And we will honor her memory by finishing what we started. Find me the Archon. Find him. And bring him to justice. Then, and only then, will I allow myself to feel anything resembling satisfaction. The hunt for High Archon Zethral was about to begin, and humanity would not rest until the being who ordered Elena Vasquez's death faced the consequences of his actions. High Archon Zethral fled from his throne world 3 days after the human offensive began, escaping aboard a heavily armored transport while his empire crumbled around him like a sandcastle before the tide. His generals begged him to stay and rally the remaining troops. But Zethral knew that staying meant capture or death, and he valued his own survival above all else. He traveled in secret through the dying remnants of his empire, moving from hidden base to hidden base, always staying one step ahead of the human hunters who searched for him with relentless determination. Finally, he reached the one place he believed no enemy could ever touch. The Void Citadel was a fortress older than the Velkari Dominion itself, built into the heart of a dead planet that orbited a dying star in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. For 3,000 years, the Citadel had never been breached by any attacking force. Its defenses upgraded and improved by each generation of Velkari engineers until it was considered absolutely impregnable. 50,000 elite warriors of the Archon's personal guard manned the Citadel, along with automated defense systems that could destroy entire fleets, and shields powerful enough to withstand orbital bombardment for months. Raul settled into the Citadel's command center and allowed himself to believe he was safe at last. "Let the humans come," he declared to his guards with some of his old arrogance returning. "They will break themselves against these walls like all the others before them. In time, we will rebuild our fleets and reclaim our empire. The humans have won a battle, but the war is far from over." What Zethral did not know was that Commander Yuki Tanaka had already been studying the Void Citadel for weeks, analyzing every scrap of intelligence about its defenses and searching for weaknesses that 3,000 years of enemies had failed to find. Tanaka was 43 years old, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to see through walls and into the hearts of her enemy. She commanded the 7th Infiltration Division, 200 of the most skilled special operations soldiers humanity had ever produced. Warriors who had trained for years in the arts of stealth and combat and impossible missions. Admiral Kane summoned her to his command center and laid out the situation with his usual bluntness. "The Archon is in the Void Citadel," Kane told her while pointing to the holographic display of the fortress. "Our fleet cannot crack those defenses without taking losses we cannot afford, and a long siege would give him time to escape or negotiate some kind of deal with the Concord. I need him captured." "Commander, I need him alive to face trial for what he did to Chancellor Vasquez. Can your people do it? Tanaka studied the display for a long moment, her mind racing through tactical calculations and risk assessments. The numbers were terrible: 200 soldiers against 50,000 defenders, plus automated weapon systems that could track and destroy targets with machine precision, plus shield generators that would have to be disabled before any extraction could take place. Any rational analysis said the mission was suicide. Tanaka smiled. We can do it, Admiral, she said with absolute confidence. Give me 3 days to prepare, and I will bring you the Archon in chains. The assault on the Void Citadel began at exactly midnight station time. When most of the garrison would be cycling through their sleep rotation, Tanaka's team approached in stealth shuttles that had been modified to be nearly invisible to sensors, slipping through the outer defense perimeter by following the exact patrol patterns that human intelligence had mapped over weeks of careful observation. All teams confirm ready, Tanaka whispered into her helmet communicator as her shuttle drifted toward an access port on the Citadel's lower levels. Alpha Team ready, came the reply from Lieutenant Chan. Bravo. Team ready, reported Sergeant Williams. Charlie and Delta teams standing by, added the voices of their commanders. Execute, Tanaka ordered. And 200 human soldiers began the most audacious assault in military history. The first phase went exactly as planned, with teams breaching the outer hull at 4 different points and neutralizing the guards before they could raise an alarm. But the Valkyrie were not fools, and their security systems detected the intrusion within minutes. Alarms screamed through the Citadel as thousands of elite warriors grabbed their weapons and rushed to intercept the human invaders. Tanaka had expected this. All teams switched to assault protocol, she commanded while firing her rifle at a squad of Valkyrie guards who came charging around a corner. Push toward the primary objectives and do not stop for anything. What followed was 16 hours of the most brutal close-quarters combat any human soldier had ever experienced. The Valkyrie fought with the desperation of warriors defending their god king, their forearms giving them terrible advantages in hand-to-hand fighting. Human soldiers fell by the dozens, but for everyone who died, 5 more pushed forward to take their place. Tanaka led from the front, as she always did, her rifle never cooling. As she cut a path through the endless waves of defenders, she took a plasma burn to her left shoulder in the 4th hour. Blade opened a gash across her ribs in the 7th hour. A piece of shrapnel lodged itself in her thigh in the 11th hour. Still she pushed forward, driven by something that the Valkyrie could not understand and could not defeat. Commander, you need medical attention, her sergeant shouted over the chaos of battle. I need the Archon, Tanaka replied through gritted teeth. Medical can wait. In the 15th hour, her team finally reached the inner sanctum where Zethral had barricaded himself with his most loyal guards. The door was reinforced with materials that could withstand direct hits from starship weapons. But human engineers had prepared a special surprise. The shaped charge detonated with a focused blast that turned the door into molten slag, and Tanaka was through the gap before the smoke had cleared. Rahl stood at the far end of the chamber, surrounded by 20 of his personal guard, his forearms holding weapons that crackled with deadly energy. You cannot take me, human, he snarled with hate dripping from every word. I am the High Archon of the Valkyrie Dominion, ruler of 200 worlds and commander of armies beyond counting. You are nothing but vermin that needs to be exterminated. Tanaka walked toward him, blood dripping from 7 different wounds, her armor scorched and torn. Her face set in an expression of absolute determination. You killed our Chancellor, she said in a voice that was quiet but carried clearly through the chamber. You thought it would break us. You were wrong. The final fight lasted less than 3 minutes. Tanaka and her remaining soldiers moved with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural, covering each other and exploiting every weakness in the Valkyrie formation. When it was over, Zethral knelt on the floor with his arms bound behind his back. His guards dead or disabled around him, he looked up at Tanaka with fear replacing the arrogance that had defined his entire life. "What are you?" he whispered. Tanaka leaned down until her face was inches from his. "We are the species you should never have touched," she answered. "Now get up, because you have an appointment with justice." She activated her communicator and spoke the words that would echo through history. "Admiral Kane, this is Commander Tanaka. The Archon is secured. Mission accomplished." The war ended 8 months after Chancellor Elena Vasquez drew her last breath on the stage of the Unity Summit. The Valkyrie Dominion, which had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years, ceased to exist as a political entity. Its military shattered beyond any hope of recovery, and its leadership either dead or awaiting trial. High Archon Zethral stood before the Galactic Tribunal on Axiom Prime, in the very same chamber where he had ordered the assassination that started everything, and he faced judgment for his crimes against humanity and against the peace of the galaxy. The trial lasted 3 weeks as witnesses testified about the planning of the assassination, the cover-up attempts, and the countless other atrocities the Valkyrie had committed during their reign of terror. When the verdict came, it surprised no one. Guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment on a prison world at the edge of known space, where Zethral would spend whatever remained of his years contemplating the consequences of his arrogance. But what came next surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. Admiral Kane stood before the Galactic Concord and made an announcement that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy forever. The United Terran Coalition does not seek to replace one empire with another, he declared in his gravelly voice. "We did not fight this war for conquest or revenge, but for justice and for the principles that Chancellor Vasquez spent her life defending. Therefore, we hereby grant independence to all former Valkyrie colony worlds. They are free to govern themselves as they see fit. We ask nothing from them except that they remember what happens when tyranny is allowed to flourish unchecked." The chamber erupted in astonishment as delegates from dozens of species struggled to understand what they were hearing. No conquering power in galactic history had ever voluntarily released its defeated enemies. Territories no species had ever won such a total victory and then simply walked away from the spoils. But humanity was not finished surprising the galaxy. Kane continued his speech with words that would be studied by historians for centuries to come. Furthermore, the Coalition proposes the establishment of new laws to govern relations between all species in the Concord. We call these the Vasquez Accords, in honor of the woman whose death united humanity and whose vision of peace among the stars guides us still. Under these accords, the assassination of any species leaders will be considered an act of war against the entire Concord. Under these accords, no species will be permitted to build the kind of military dominance that the Valkyrie used to terrorize their neighbors. Under these accords, all disputes will be resolved through negotiation and arbitration, with the full force of the Concord available to punish those who choose violence over dialogue. The vote on the Vasquez Accords was unanimous. For the first time in the long history of the Galactic Concord, every species agreed on something. And what they agreed on was that humanity's vision of peace through justice was worth pursuing. In the months that followed, humanity poured resources into rebuilding the devastated Valkyrie. World's Terran engineers helped repair infrastructure that human weapons had destroyed. Human doctors provided medical care to populations that had suffered under both the war and the previous regime. Teachers from Earth established schools where a young Valkyrie could learn about democracy and freedom and the rights of all beings. It was not easy, and it was not quick, but slowly, the former subjects of the Dominion began to believe that a better future was possible. Ambassador Dexal of the Zentari Council requested a private meeting with Admiral Kane and asked the question that every alien diplomat wanted answered. Why did you not take revenge? Dexal asked with genuine confusion coloring his voice. Your people had every right to destroy the Velkari utterly, to make an example of them that would terrify the galaxy for generations. You had the power to become the new masters of 100 worlds. Yet you chose to free them instead. I do not understand. Admiral, how could you show such mercy to the beings who murdered your leader? Kane was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face showing emotions that he rarely allowed others to see. Chancellor Vasquez once told me something that I never forgot, he finally said with a heaviness in his voice. She said that the true measure of a civilization is not how it treats its friends, but how it treats its enemies. She believed that humanity could be better than the species that came before us. She believed that we could break this cycle of conquest and revenge that has defined galactic history. She died for that belief. Ambassador, the least we can do is prove her right. Dexal studied the human with new understanding in his 6 ancient eyes. You are a remarkable species, he said finally. Terrifying, yes, but remarkable. The galaxy has never seen anything quite like you. Kane allowed himself a small smile. We have a saying on Earth that might explain it, he replied. It goes something like this. Speak softly and carry a big stick. We spent a century being soft and building our stick in secret. The Valkyrie forced us to use it. And now the galaxy knows what we are capable of. But we would rather be known for what we choose not to do. We would rather be known for building than destroying. That is the legacy Chancellor Vasquez wanted for humanity. And that is the legacy we will fight to preserve. 1 year after the war ended, a statue was unveiled on Axiom Primate, stood in the exact spot where Elena Vasquez had fallen. Carved from white marble imported from Earth and standing 20 feet tall, the statue showed the Chancellor as she had lived. Strong and dignified and reaching out her hand in friendship to all who would take it beneath the statue. An inscription was carved in 43 languages, one for every species in the Galactic Concord. She gave her life for unity. We honored her with victory. We honor her still with mercy. Humans and aliens alike gathered at the statue to pay their respects, laying flowers and tokens of remembrance at its base, speaking quietly of the woman who had changed everything by dying and the species that had changed everything by how they responded. A new saying spread among the stars in the years that followed, whispered by traitors and diplomats and soldiers of every species whenever the subject of humanity came up in conversation. Humanity will die for peace, they said with a mixture of admiration and fear. But threaten that peace, and they will make you die for war. They are the guardians of the galaxy now. They are the species that chose mercy when they could have chosen revenge. They are the ones who killed an empire and then rebuilt it better than before. The stars remember what humanity did. The stars will never forget what humanity chose not to don somewhere in the cosmos. The spirit of Elena Vasquez looked down on her people and smiled, knowing that her dream of a peaceful galaxy had finally begun to come true. Not through her life, but through her death. And through the incredible species she had been so proud to lead, the war was over. The future was bright, and humanity had finally found its place among the stars. Not as conquerors or victims, but as something far more powerful. They had become the conscience of the galaxy, the species that proved strength and mercy could exist together, and the ones who would make sure that no tyrant ever rose to threaten the peace again.